Okay, well, we'll press on. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us. We've got an introduction to the cloud server with Jonathan Harris, who's on the screen here. It's the intent. The intent here is to share with people what it actually means, rather than greater detail of how it works, or what the benefits are, and to dispel some of the concerns that people have about moving into the cloud. And I'll let Jonathan cover that off. Just from a housekeeping point of view, if you have any questions, which are great, we want those. If we could put them in the chat or the text box, and we'll answer those at the end. But if somebody has something really pressing, maybe they could put their hand up. But in the main, let's try and keep them to the end, if that's okay with people. It'll be about 45 to 60 minutes, depending on how we go, and enjoy oneself. Okay, over to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Michael. So I'll just share my screen. I've got a PowerPoint slide deck that we can go through. So bear with me a sec. Slideshow from the beginning. So hopefully everyone can see the screen here, the introduction to cloud server. I'm sort of presuming everyone can see that. Michael, can you see that?
Absolutely, yeah, no problem at all.
Excellent. Okay. All right. So so maybe I'll go back. So cloud server. So Cobweb have a cloud server offer, and what that means is that what we're finding is that the cloud can be, or has these things that are on this slide here. So it can be expensive. It can be unwieldy. People do get what's called a bill shock at the end of a monthly cycle, a billing cycle, and the costs can run away with itself. So cost is obviously key here. So that's one item which we'll cover off in a second. The others is that actually going to the cloud and actually understanding how a business goes along their journey into the cloud can be quite complex. So there's understanding the business, there's also understanding the technology side of a cloud. And we're talking about Microsoft's public cloud, Azure here. And if anyone has ever looked at like the Azure calculator, or looked at what is the Azure cloud and what are the components that make up, there are millions and millions of components. Well, maybe not millions, but there's a lot of components that make up the Microsoft Azure cloud, and to cover every eventuality. So really, the key word is complex. And also, how do you move your business to the cloud? What steps do you take? How do you mitigate the cost? Simplify the complexity. And so what we've come up with is as an offering really of cloud server. And what the cloud server is, or what the Cobweb cloud server is, it's one of 9 different servers that are fixed in their compute. And when I talk about compute, I'm talking about the processing power and the CPU of the server, and the storage. So these are sort of, it's a bit like buying and maybe an analogy, buying a suit for a wedding. Well, this is a going to a shop, and there's one of 9 suits on the shelf, and it might not be what the suit is that you end up with, but it's a starting point. It's a suit that maybe fits. So it's one of 9 different options with varying sizes of CPU and RAM and storage, and it's each one of these 9 servers has a fixed cost. And so that means that you could say, oh, well, I want 9 of these, or 10 of these, or 3 of these. And it's a way of helping you visualize the capacity that a business might require in order to budget, or to get a fixed price of what a solution might look like, without having to go through the bespoke process, having someone identify exactly what you need, and the full sort of tailoring service, if you like. So it's a fixed one of 9 solutions. So it's a traditional. Well, it's a monthly cost. So you're winning with the operational costs versus a capital expenditure cost, which a business might have if they were looking for on-premises, and from there you can build up, and we can talk about what you can do after a cloud server from that way for other options later. We can include extra things like backups and VPNs. I'm not sure of people's technical expertise on this, but there are other things that we can add on to those 9 different cloud servers. So the main takeaway is it's one of 9 fixed price servers. So why consider a cloud server? And some of these I've covered already, with complexity. But so within these 9 servers that Cobweb offer, we build the server for you as part of the service. So it gets deployed as part of the setup. So we'll install the operating system. We'll present a public IP address for your IT people to log into it, or we can log into it. It's a clean vanilla server at an OS level. So we provision the server, we do all of the setup for you, so you don't need to worry about having an Azure expert to build the server. That's the first one. Fixed price we've covered, so that's good for budgets. It allows you to not have bill shock, have a fixed price for a number of different servers. So you don't have the worry, which is sort of bill shock money type of thing. It's built on Microsoft's Azure technology, as I mentioned. So you're getting the benefits of Azure. So you're getting a cloud solution that's built in a region that's local to you. So it's there's 2 in the UK, and each region is built of 3 data centers, and each data center has fault tolerance in power and cooling and internet connectivity. So that basically the hardware that these are built on are Microsoft's fault tolerant hardware platform. So you're not having to worry about infrastructure and cooling and heating and all of those things that you would have with an on-premises server. You're getting increased security. So well as physical security, the server is not in your office, it's in the data center, it's in Microsoft secure data centers. There are some free services that you get with it, with Azure. One of them is this basic distributed denial of service. So that comes free with Azure anyway, so it's included as part of this cloud server. And then we can add our managed service wrap. So Cobweb have got a managed service solution. We can provide a monitoring service on top. We can do all of the proactive reporting and looking at the servers, making sure that they're performing well. And also you get access to people like me, sort of experts in Azure, and we can help you along the journey, because this is just a shop window, if you like. If you come to us and say, well, this is all good, but I actually need to do this, I need to work this way, my business doesn't work this way, it needs to be something different. So we can bespoke solutions for you, and this is something, but it might not be what your business finally needs, but obviously we provide that expertise and can help you along the journey. So okay, so what could you use a cloud server for? These are sort of more examples of where a cloud server might be used, and these are just some examples that we've seen, and you might have other ideas, or this might spark you to consider something that you're dealing with at the moment that this might fit that purpose. So the first slide here is a traditional server. As people move from on-premises Windows servers to SharePoint, sometimes they might not like or might not want to move their files into SharePoint and go through a browser, or they might want a drive map. They might want an S drive or something like that. So a cloud server could be a traditional file server. and that's file server can sit in Azure, so you get all those benefits that I've spoke about already. So that's one option. It could be for an application, and that application could have a web front end, and therefore it needs to be accessible via the internet, perhaps, and you need a server to put that application on, a Windows server, and this could be that server. So the application gets installed. We allow web access into the server. We can restrict who has access, by static IPs. We can say only people from this office could access this server if you want, or we can allow people from anywhere to access it. We can tailor the inbound access. It is always on. It has a public IP address. It can have a DNS name as well, so they can target via those mechanisms. Or it could, so the next one could be an application. Maybe you've got, say, Sage, for example, Sage account, Sage payroll. You don't want that on premises. You want it to be backed up. You want someone else to be looking after the server. You could have an application like Sage on this server, and then that can be accessed either via a VPN access. So someone at home with remote working could connect onto that server with a secure virtual private network. So they've got a secure tunnel to it. And there's other remote access options we'll talk about in a minute. There might be other applications that we haven't listed here that might fit into this mechanism. So the Active Directory is if you have an on-premises environment and you've got Windows AD, which most people have, unless you're very, very small as a business, you might want a copy of that Windows AD that holds your usernames and your passwords and key information. You might want to have that in the cloud for maybe resiliency or disaster recovery. And you just want maybe a low spec server just to have a copy of that server active across a VPN tunnel, but in the cloud. So that could be an option. And then the final option that we've got here is remote desktop. So remote desktop is an older way of connecting to providing a desktop to users who are working from home. And this server could be used as a remote desktop server for a number of different people. And they could use this to connect onto a hosted desktop where maybe their Sage application, for example, is installed. And then that would allow them to get into Azure, and they're working within the Azure bubble. So they're not working across a VPN. They're using their internet connect to a desktop, and then they're working as if they were in the same room as the server. And some of you might have come across that. So that a remote desktop, there are other technologies. It has been upgraded with something called Windows Virtual Desktop that we can talk about later if you're interested, but it could be used as a remote desktop. That needs additional licenses, which can be added to as an additional option to this scenario or example. So this is a price of list of the 9 servers really, and as I said, they're fixed price. They're fixed in their compute, so they're fixed in the amount of CPUs or cores and memory, and they're fixed in their disk space as well. And this is sort of like you go to your shop and you want to buy a suit. Well, I want 2 of number 1 and 3 of this one, and it all depends on what your application requires, and what your, say, remote desktop users, how many do you need, how many servers and how many people. And this is the shopping list, if you like. So the servers range from sort of just £54 per month to £280 per month. And then you can add on backups on top. We can add on VPNs. We can add on remote desktop licensing on top of that. So that's the example price. So let's say you've said, okay, well, this is really good. This fits what I need, and I need a couple of servers, and But now what I want to do is I've got an application coming in, and that application needs to be a higher spec than one of those 9 servers. Or I want to do something with a database, or I want to do something different, or I want to work in a slightly different way. Maybe I work in retail, or maybe I need to have something bespoke to me. So we can take a cloud server and we can change it from a fixed solution into the more of the traditional, well, it's not traditional, the other way of paying for it, which is a pay-as-you-go method. And that is where we can help you to find a solution that fits, and we can upgrade the environment, and we can move it into an area for you as a business that can be customized and fit your requirements. And one of those things would be Windows Virtual Desktop, which is the next upgrade of remote desktop. We can look at that. We can look at really anything. The whole of Azure is available to you as an upgrade to this. Right. So yeah, and then it moves into pay-as-you-go, as I said, and there are other cost optimization that you can do with pay-as-you-go. We can talk about that later. Yeah, so and then moves into the bespoke solution. So it's all it's a journey. This is the sort of step 1 of your journey to the cloud, and then this would be sort of step 2, if you like. So I think, Michael, that's really what I wanted to cover. I hope I haven't sort of sped through it. This is more, I think, back to you.
Sorry, I was on mute there. I beg your pardon. I was just listening to what Jonathan was saying there. I mean, there are not a lot of slides here, and I know we've allocated 60 minutes, but hopefully there'll be some questions. But I just wanted to add a few things there as well. For those that some people on this call do know me, hello Mike, I can see you there. For others that don't, I'm one of the sales guys effectively within the Cobweb team, and I talk to people every day about a variety of things, not least of which this. And one of the things that people say is that there's not reluctance, there's caution in going into the Azure world, not so much the Active Directory, but in the areas that we've talked about here. And to have these options available is a really good way, if they're required, is a really good way to start to understand Azure, not just in terms of what it can do, but how much is it going to cost me? And once you have a model that fits for you, so one of the 9, so number 6, whatever that is, if that fits for what it is that you require, as things develop and emerge and people become more familiar with it, then to go to the pay-as-you-go model, which is effectively consumption, is a much better way than diving into that, unless, of course, you've got the knowledge and resource to be able to manage and monitor it. Otherwise, things can get out of control. So there is real value in having these different stages available for many customers, and that's what's beginning to happen. You know, we have an initiative for next year, the beginning of next year, to do exactly what we're doing now and to have more of these, but just to make people happier and more familiar with what can be achieved within Azure, because it's, you know, Azure is this cloud, it's this huge great thing, you know, it's too big for me, I don't need that. Well, actually you can, especially if you do it this way. Is that a reasonable summary, Jonathan?
Yeah, it's a worry-free step towards the cloud, and that's why this slide here saying about a trial cloud server for 30 days is basically a taster for businesses to use this to have their experience of what a cloud server is, and they don't need to know the complexities. They don't need to know how to build a server in Azure. They don't need to know how to price a solution, because we've taken the complexities out of it, and we've built one of 9 different solutions that might hopefully will fit some of the scenarios, and then if anyone needs something different, well, then we can engage with us and we can discuss different options. Because of the complexity is vast in Azure, we're trying to ease the process and help people along the way. So
So I think, as it says there on point 3, we've got a 30-day free trial. So what will happen is everybody that's on the call and other people as well will contact you to see if there's any take-up, whether there's any interest. And if there is, at that point, determine which one of the different options might be appropriate from a trial point of view. And then at the end of it, says after 30 days, we'll call you for the feedback. I think we'll probably call you halfway through. I would anyway, just to find out whether it's working and whether we've got the right one. But as I say, it is an understanding from Cobweb that taking people into a different environment that they've not necessarily been into, in a way that protects them and give them, a trial as well. So there's no commitment at the end of the trial. If it's not for you for whatever reason, then that's the end of that. But in terms of setting things up and organising things, we will do that. I'm just looking here. I've got some question from Carl. Hello, Carl. How does this differ from simply creating a VM in Azure, virtual machine in Azure?
Well, I'll take that. So Carl, this is it differs in the way that the pricing model is fixed, and the actual creating of the virtual machines in Azure is handled by Cobweb. So that knowledge level sounds like you know how to create virtual machines in Azure, and that's good. But for people who don't have that experience or don't know how to do that, Cobweb do that on behalf of the customer. So it's really simplifying the process and fixing the price. So at the end of the day, the VM is in Azure. And so the result is the same.
Yeah. Jonathan, rather than me typing, is it okay for me just to talk on a?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask if a customer did decide to go ahead with this VM, where does it reside? On the customer's own Azure portal, using a subscription that you create for the reseller, or does it reside in Cobweb's portal?
So it resides in a separate tenant. So the tenant isn't the customer's tenant. It is a tenant dedicated to the customer, but it's a separate tenant from any other tenant that they might have, because we had to apply in order to because the price is fixed. There's a policy within Azure. Try not to get too technical, but there's a policy within the Azure portal that means that the customer does have access to an Azure portal, and they can see the server. They can shut down the server if they want to and restart the server. But beyond that, the customer can't do anything else in the portal. So we've applied a policy to it and this is as a result of, obviously, we're selling it as a fixed price. If we sell it for £54 and then the customer goes in and changes it to a high spec server, there's a disjoin on our billing system between the pay as you go. We're getting the pay as you go, and we're charging a fixed rate to the customer. So we need to make sure that the customer doesn't get a high spec server, and we're having to pay Microsoft the amount of money.
I understand to a certain extent, but if the customer decided to move that infrastructure away to their own portal at some stage for one reason or another, maybe they need something that you weren't able to provide or something, how difficult would that then be?
Yeah, so we can do a migration of that. We can migrate the subscription into another tenant.
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, I have a question actually. How does someone determine which flavor, which of the 9 they need? What do they need to know, and how can we help them there?
It depends on what application they're wishing to run. So if and what they're intending to do. So if they had an application, the example was Sage. So an application from the manufacturer will say it needs to have X amount of CPU, X amount of memory, and then that helps to see what server would fit. Okay,
all right. There's a question here from Stephen Pye. Hello, Stephen. He said, any comment on MS availability stats? Some anecdotal issues last week with OneDrive and 365 generally.
Yeah, so those, obviously, the items called out there, OneDrive and 365, are separate from Azure. So Azure will have a different stats, a different uptime and availability. I can look into those and come back to you, Stephen. Hopefully that answers your question.
Are there any other questions? I'm just looking at my screen here.
Well, sorry, I don't want to hog your time, Jonathan. I have one final question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
You're running applications on those cloud servers, like heavy workloads like SQL. You'll probably understand that for remote working clients, and even for clients that aren't in headquarters with a proper high-speed VPN connection, are going to struggle to get data to transit over those lines to where they actually are. So a lot of times people will use a type of thin client setup. So they'll maybe leverage something like Windows Virtual Desktop or RDS or something like that in order to run the heavy workloads at the server end.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience or expertise around integrating those Windows Virtual Desktops into the SQL server and creating sessions that people can remote access into? Is that something you guys have experience in, or something we can talk to someone about?
For cloud server or for a bespoke solution?
Just for cloud server. I mean, if we picked one of the servers that was suitable to run SQL, we wanted to actually run the sessions on Windows Virtual Desktops on the same environment. Essentially, what we want is someone sitting at their house to have a thin client type connection using Windows Virtual Desktops without having to drag database data down into their own PC. Is that something that you guys have experience in setting up?
There's a couple of answers to this. One is the SQL side. SQL, the only version of SQL that is going to fit into this is going to be SQL Server Express, the free version.
Yeah.
SQL Standard and Enterprise, the more expensive production, is not something that Cloud Server will. It's not an option that we're entertaining with Cloud Server. So let's say SQL Express. It might not work, but let's say it does work for you, and you can have a SQL Express here. It's free. It's just taking up disk space, and you're not paying anything extra. So just humor me and say that. Let's say that works in your scenario. The next thing is, well, how does your customer access, your home worker access that environment that the cloud server is providing? And remote desktop, a traditional remote desktop, which is a cloud server that's providing a few desktops to users, would be the connection method that they would use. So they would then take over that remote desktop, which is in the Azure environment, in order to access the database. So that's how it's possible. There would be additional licensing for RDS cows, but so that's more of a traditional way. RDS, as I said, has now been replaced. It's not replaced, but it's sort of upgrade of it is Windows Virtual Desktop. And the way that Windows Virtual Desktop works is that it needs to be where we said before about the tenant, and the subscription is in a separate tenant to the customer's tenant.
Yes.
Windows Virtual Desktop won't work in this separate tenant. It has to be in the customer's tenant. So for Windows Virtual Desktop, cloud's only RDS is a remote desktop mechanism that would work. Windows Virtual Desktop wouldn't work in Cloud Server. Sort of as a side note to this, what we're looking to do as well as a separate product is we're looking as a Windows Virtual Desktop offering as a standard package going forward, similar to this as an off-the-shelf. You want you've got this number of users and they need this amount of power. That we're coming up with a similar 9 server list or 9 options for Windows Virtual Desktop, and that will be a setup of Windows Virtual Desktop, and it will be in the customer's own tenant. It won't be a fixed price, but it will be a fixed setup and a fixed solution to help people architect or work towards that. But that's a sort of separate webinar, really.
Yeah. Okay. No problem.
Okay. Another question here from Ian. Morning, Ian. He says he asks, how are Mac clients able to connect to this server, will they still be able to mount SMB services?
So Mac users can connect to to the environment. They can the VPN connection can for a VPN connection to Azure, which is called a point-to-site connection, can be made from a Mac client. So that's possible. To connect to an RDS solution, if that is in the solution, a Mac device can connect to an RDS remote desktop server. So there isn't any issues with Mac devices on this. Hopefully that answers your question, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Another question from Stephen. He asks, could Cloud Server host an Oracle database?
Honest answer, no, is the answer. Similar to the SQL question, we've not put Oracle on this. That would be more of a bespoke solution, and Azure can do everything. So Stephen, we would have to look at a bespoke solution for that, and we'd need to know, how big's your Oracle database, what operating system. It doesn't have to be Windows. It might be Linux. I'm not an Oracle expert, but the cloud server is not a good fit for that. But Azure is a fit for everything, so we can help you with that separately to this.
Thanks. I thought that might be the case.
Any more questions from anybody? You don't have to put them in the chat. Just shout them out if there are any. I guess not. Well, Jonathan, do you want to add anything?
Well, whilst I'm here and I've got some time, I'm happy to answer any questions on Azure at all. It doesn't have to be cloud server. So if anyone's got any concerns about Azure or cloud, they can ask me. But beyond that, and the takeaway really is, it's a simple solution. It's one of 9 servers. It's the key thing here is it's fixed price. It might not be right for your solution, but it's a fixed price server, and it's a starting point, and it's a comfort to moving into that next step. So that's what cloud server is. The cost
Ian's just popped in with a question. How would the cost compare between SharePoint for file storage and running the same in cloud server?
So SharePoint, I'm not a SharePoint expert, but the conversations we've had with customers is once your customer has so much data in SharePoint, it can get really expensive. So the comparable storage for Azure versus SharePoint storage, when you're looking at terabytes, the answer is it's cheaper. This would be a cheaper solution for a large amounts of storage. And there's other options you can do with archiving in Azure as well, and tiering with hot, cool, and archive storage, where you can sort of the data can tear down into cheaper storage. So there's lots of cool things you can do in Azure.
Just a question from me. If you've tiered down and consequently reduce your pricing, does that impact on your ability to get information back quickly?
It does, yeah. So it takes longer to get the data from archive into cool storage.
Okay.
So I can't remember off the top of my head. I think it's 24 hours. So if you request something from archive, it has to go through the mechanisms to be then rehydrated, if you like. Okay.
Thank you for that. Any more questions from anyone? Okay, well, in that case, if you have nothing to add, thank you very much. As I mentioned as it showed on the slide, and I mentioned, we will follow up, and we will contact you to find out whether there's interest and how we can go next. I just see Chloe's just put her hand up. Sorry, Chloe, go ahead.
So that's all right. I've just seen that Ian has just popped in another question as you were closing off there. I just didn't want it to get unanswered.
Okay.
So Ian's gone ahead and has asked, is such data tiering included in the fixed price?
No, it's not. Good question. But the data tiering that we discussed is not part of Cloud Server. That would be part of a bespoke Azure solution. But by all means, we're here. Engage with us. If this doesn't fit your purpose, we're here to help. We want to help you, and we're happy to have these conversations and see if we can come up with a solution that fits your requirements. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Ian. Sorry, mate, I didn't see you slide that secondary in. Beg your pardon. Okay, so if there are no more questions, Jonathan, you said your bit. Chloe, is there anything that you want to add in relation to this?
No, I think we've got an excellent team that Jonathan is a part of that really enables people to kind of take advantage of Azure in ways that they might not know is possible from themselves. So I think having that conversation and kind of explaining the details of what it is that your business requires is truly that first step, I would say, is kind of opening that door and saying, what, I need this. What do you know that can help us get to that point? And that can really open the door to a lot of possibilities.
That's great. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, and until the next time. Thank you very much. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Thank you.